Together with a broad network of partners, we launched the Euro-Heritage Architects for Heritage in Ukraine, a project co-funded by the European Union under a dedicated call for proposals to support Ukrainian displaced people and the Ukrainian cultural and creative sectors. Within this project, European and Ukrainian heritage professionals, architects, designers, engineers, local authorities, and community representatives from Ukrainian cities come together to share knowledge and hands-on experience in protecting and restoring Ukraine's cultural heritage. Through this podcast series, we want to bring forward the voices behind the project. How can heritage bring communities together in today's world? What does it take for heritage to become not only a shared responsibility, but a real resource for development? And how can we regenerate valuable heritage in a way that it's sustainable, economically viable, and culturally meaningful? Hello, my name is Fulco Treffers, and I'm the founder and CEO of urban coalition Rossi. In this podcast series, we explore key questions: how to assess the value of heritage and the damage it has suffered, how to approach the regeneration of both cherished and contested heritage, and how new technologies, education, architectural competitions, and participatory practices can support this work. Stay with us, there's much to explore. As of January 6, 2026, Russian aggression has damaged more than 1,600 cultural heritage sites and over 2,400 cultural infrastructure objects across Ukraine. That's why we're opening this series with a topic that couldn't be more urgent: assessing damage to heritage. As part of the Euro-Heritage project, Marcello Rossi and his colleagues from the Italian National Council of Architects shared their experience of how this is done in Italy. So let's start with the question: what makes Italy's approach to heritage damage assessments unique?
Italy has the greater part of the heritage patrimonium, especially in buildings all over the world, and has also a very fragile territory because of earthquakes and natural disaster. So Italy got really a very long and great experience into two things: how to manage with the historical buildings and how to afford calamities like earthquake, and created Struttura Tecnica Nazionale, that is something like a national technical structure organized by the government that has the duty to intervene in case of natural disaster in order to evaluate the damages immediately and to have a methodology very, very simple and very concrete. With these technicians that are engineer, architects, but also an architect from the army, we built some lessons in order to export this methodology for the Ukrainian technicians, both architects or engineer.
Organizational structure differs from country to country. So we asked Olena Oliynyk, the Vice President of the National Union of Architects of Ukraine, who is currently responsible for evaluating heritage damage in Ukraine.
Зараз у нас в Україні відповідальними за стан збереження і моніторинг пам'яток є департаменти культурної спадщини. Тобто спочатку Міністерство культури і підпорядковані йому відділки культурної спадщини при обласних адміністраціях. Треба розширити повноваження і структуру цих департаментів охорони, тому що це одна-дві людини, на яких покладено все. І збереження, і відновлення, і дослідження.
Looking at the Struttura Tecnica Nazionale methodology, what is the step-by-step process this structure follows?
The steps are four. So the first one is in prevention. Now, this is not the case because the war is ongoing, but this prevention is the step when you train the technicians, then goes the area where the disaster happened or the war got. The second one is the ongoing disaster. So when an earthquake gets or when an area is damaged by war, and this is just an aid to the population or to the people living in that places. Diagnostic, we train people, we train the technicians in order to evaluate if the buildings can be reused, and then also how to evaluate the costs for the rebuilding or the revamping or the reconstruction. The last step is the reconstruction. This is also very important, but the very critical one is the third one, because in the diagnostic you choose what to do. There is a strategy, and this is very important, that each technician that goes use the same method, so that you can compare the results, and you can have let's say, yes, all comparable data that you can use both for evaluating of cost, because if the data are comparable, you have also cost comparable, and so you can choose the priorities, and you can evaluate in this time also the general cost. Of course, is always statistic in the first step, because it's immediate. So you don't have a construction design. You have just an evaluation into this evaluation that is a standard evaluation, so common for all the buildings. You can evaluate the single costs, and you can also have an idea of the general cost on the area. Of course, when we speak about heritage, the main aim is not to reconstruct, but to revamp, so to preserve the historical value of this building, and also to preserve the walls, the bricks, the wood that make part of it.
One of the experts sharing his experience in building emergency management is Roberto Rocchi. He's an architect and chairman of the Architects' Council of Europe Disaster Relief Task Force. So, what is the appropriate sequence of actions when assessing a damaged building in a wartime context? And what should specialists take into account while doing this?
Of course, in Ukraine, we're in very specific and peculiar situation right now, because, usually when the response phase, that is when the bad thing happens, is very quick, very fast, like an earthquake, flooding. The phase after that one is the reconstruction phase. But nowadays in Ukraine, we are still in this part when bad things are still happening. So what we try to do, we try to suggest those teams how to work in not a real safe and secure environment. So basically the four main steps when you are in a situation like this are survey, analyze, assess, and report after that. So when you are there, you use everything you have. Your eyes, of course, your phones, drones if you have. You can, if you have access to the satellite imageries, you can use also that one. Thermal cameras as well. But you have to bring everything with yourself. So we said, you survey, you analyze, and you assess. What does it mean? That means you say if one building is suitable or not. We suggested them what we are doing and what we have done in previous emergencies, that to identify buildings with three different kind of levels, red, green, and yellow. The green one means that the building is suitable for almost, the damaged building is suitable for almost any kind of activity. But if the building is damaged in a very serious way, you can put a yellow label there. That means that you can use this building just partially. And partially means partially not all the day, so maybe just in daylight because there is no electricity there, or just part of the building can be used, not everything. Red one means that the building cannot be used at all. But this doesn't mean that the building has to be destroyed, just that you cannot use for your purpose. But later on, because just this is the first assessment. So when you go back, you verify all the data you have collected, and you can decide if even the red building can be partially used, but just later on. So when we are talking about cultural heritage, we are talking about traditions, memories, things happened in the past that has to be brought to the future generation. You have to keep those things alive. So that's why you have to embed in your teams also historical people, archaeological people, anthropologists, and I would say even psychologists. So those people have to be with you and to analyze from their point of view as well, and decide which kind of intervening you can do on those sensitive buildings, let me say.
And what should be the sequence of actions when assessing damaged heritage specifically?
В першу чергу це документування ушкоджень всіма можливими засобами. І 3D-сканування, і опис, і оцифрування, і обміри. Повний звіт технічний, конструктивний і архітектурний. Потім робота з уламками, сортування уламків і максимальне їх по можливості збереження з прив'язкою до місця, з якого вони видалені, якщо це можливо. Якщо уламків цих небагато. Якщо багато, то просто перевезення їх в безпечне місце з нумерацією і з якоюсь ідентифікацією. І нарешті, після цього вже забезпечення консервації пам'ятки, тобто приведення її в такий стан, щоб вона не руйнувалася далі від нанесених мікроруйнувань. Крім того, ще зараз ми робимо дослідження конструкції, стін, фундаментів, тому що часто ці мікроруйнування, особливо від ударних хвиль, вони є непомітними. Кілька тріщин на фасаді – добре, а ще, крім того, можуть бути глибокі тріщини в конструкціях фундаментів, які призводять до того, що об'єкт, якщо його не законсервувати, він через певний час просто завалиться сам собою. Тому що нарешті ці тріщини починають трошки коливатися, розширятися, і це призводить уже потім до подальших руйнувань. Тому треба ще забезпечити по можливості обстеження невидимих частин, перекриттів, фундаментів, шурфування, наскільки це можливо. Якщо це неможливо, треба просто мати на увазі, що це може бути, і забезпечити консервацію пам'ятки для того, щоб надалі можна було вже перейти до повноцінної реставрації.
In your opinion, when it comes to the methodology developed by Italian institutions, how applicable is it to the Ukrainian context?
The methodology is it can be used in the same way. So the training of technicians, these forms that you must fill, in this standardization of method and evaluation of cost, so that you can compare all the data. And also can be shared, and is the same, the capacity to relate with all the institutions that are involved in this time, so that the army, the fire prevention, the Red Cross, and so on. So this is the part that is really almost the same. Then the damages are technically different, because an earthquake is different from a bomb, and also on the buildings, the waves of a bomb are different from the seismic action on the foundation of the building. So the damages are different, but they can be studied in the same way, let's say. So this is not so different. Another very important difference is that a natural disaster happened one time, and then you must reconstruct, like an earthquake, or several times, but in a very short period. War is completely different. So maybe you evaluate the assessment of a building now, and you put it safe in a short time, and maybe in 1 week the war come back in that place. And also the wildness of a war is completely different. Usually earthquakes are in a specific area, war involve infrastructures, industries, government places, houses, and spread all over the territory. So this is completely different, and so you must relate with this very specific and completely different situation.
What other aspects should be taken into account when assessing war-related damage to heritage?
Наприклад, характер пошкоджень спадщини в результаті військових дій. Нами було пророблено спеціальне дослідження в Харкові нашими колегами, його очолювала Катерина Коблицька. Вони дослідили характер пошкоджень пам'яток в залежності від типу снарядів. Тобто, в залежності від того, чи це є пряме попадання, чи це є ударна хвиля, чи це є комплексні пошкодження, пошкодження пам'ятки є різними. Більше того, багато з них, цих пошкоджень, можуть бути непомітними, бо вони відбиваються в конструкціях, в фундаменті. Тобто це є унікальні дослідження, які зроблені українськими архітекторами і вченими, і які ми зможемо передати теж і нашим західноєвропейським колегам.
In Ukraine, we said that we are still in the response phase. That means there is still war going on over there. That means those teams going to survey, analyze and assess, they can be in an environment not very friendly. So those teams, you have to embed also people able to provide you a security environment. When we say safe environment, we mean technician, they can decide if you are under danger, that something can fall down from a roof, poisoning water, electricity leakage, something like that. But security environment is something related to military. That's why I tried to suggest them that before they go there, they need to have somebody clearing the area. Because not only there could be people that don't want you there, even if you are an helper, but that you could find there unexploded ordnances, or even worse, would be trapped that are not for you, but you can find that also that.
To sum up, which key recommendations do you consider most important to share?
First recommendation is that should be done something like this struttura tecnica nazionale, so to find a way of coordination of all the technicians that are involved into that, in order to have this standardized methodology, whatever it is, but to have it, to have this standardized evaluation of costs, and to have this network of technicians that work in the same way. So this is the most important recommendation. And then also to train them to work in cooperation with the other institutions. So with the army, with the fire prevention, with the Red Cross, with the hospitals, and with the population, with the local authorities, with all the different actors involved. So you must have these two capacities. One, to coordinate, to have a standardized method, and then the very technical one that is our job on how to reconstruct the building. And the main aim in our lesson is to preserve the heritage, so not to destroy or reconstruct. For example, maybe the fire departments, in order to preserve the life of the people, evaluate immediately to leave it and to destroy it. Our job is to preserve it, maybe because there is an historical value into that building.
As we can see, coordination between stakeholders is crucial in the process of safeguarding heritage, from the moment damage is assessed and throughout the entire reconstruction process. Our next episode will also focus largely on coordination, but in a different context: the reconstruction of Soviet-era housing, why there is a need for it, what challenges arise in the process, and which stakeholders need to be involved. So stay tuned.